Imagine yourself standing atop the rough stone walls of your city. The wind brushes against your face, carrying with it the smell of dust, sweat, and fear. The siege has dragged on far too long, and everyone knows that sooner or later the enemy will unveil something more terrifying than arrows or catapult stones. You try to steady your breath, to keep your thoughts clear, but then, in one rare moment of silence between attacks, a violent sound tears across the sky. It is not the whistle of an arrow nor the roar of a falling boulder. It is something heavier, sharper, more monstrous, like the air itself is being ripped apart. Before you can make sense of the noise, a massive bolt, nearly the size of a spear, slams into the wall just inches from where you stand. Stone explodes. Dust blinds you. Someone screams behind you. When your vision clears, you realize that a single shot has already taken a life. And the worst part is that the machine responsible for it is positioned more than 300 meters away. The weapon that just shattered the wall beside you is not magic, nor creature, nor trick. It is the cold, calculated brilliance of Roman engineering. The Ballista, one of the deadliest artillery machines of the ancient world. The Ballista was more than a colossal crossbow. Some stood over 3 meters tall and required a team of 10 trained soldiers to operate. It was a masterpiece of mathematics, physics, and ruthless military intent. Its devastating power came from 2 tightly twisted bundles of sinew, usually made from animal tendons or even human hair, held under immense tension. When Roman soldiers cranked back the bowstring using a winch, they wound those sinew bundles even tighter, storing a terrifying amount of energy. The moment the latch released, that energy exploded outward in a single violent burst, launching its projectile with enough force to pierce stone, shields, armor, and bone. The ballista could fire enormous iron-tipped bolts nearly a meter long, or hurl stones weighing 20 to 30 kilograms. The Greeks had invented the underlying torsion technology centuries earlier, but Rome did not simply copy it. They perfected it. By the 1st century BCE, Roman engineers like Vitruvius began refining and standardizing the machine's design. They calculated ideal ratios, introduced precise measurements, and created multiple classes of ballista for different purposes. Light models offered surgical accuracy, able to strike a single defender atop a wall hundreds of meters away. Heavy models acted like ancient cannons, shattering fortifications with relentless bombardment. Rome transformed the ballista from an impressive novelty into a disciplined, mass-produced instrument of war. What truly set Rome apart was not merely the strength of the ballista, but the way the empire employed it with cold precision. The Romans understood that a weapon, no matter how powerful, was only as effective as the system behind it. And so they built a system, methodical, disciplined, and devastating. During sieges, legions erected entire batteries of ballistae around enemy cities, transforming open fields into massive artillery platforms. The lighter versions, nicknamed scorpiones, the scorpions, had a very specific role: to silence the defenders. A scorpion could pick off a single man standing on the ramparts at a distance where most archers could barely see their target. One moment a defender peeked over the battlements, and the next he lay lifeless on the ground, struck by a bolt he never even heard coming. It was psychological warfare as much as physical destruction. No one dared expose themselves. No one dared look out. Fear itself became a weapon. While the scorpions paralyzed the walls, the heavy ballistae delivered the killing blows to the structures themselves. A 30-kilogram stone, launched at terrifying velocity, was not merely a projectile, it was a force of nature. Walls cracked and buckled, towers trembled, gates splintered under repeated hits. The Romans understood that the city's defenses did not need to collapse all at once. They only needed to weaken piece by piece until the inevitable breach appeared. And once a breach appeared, Rome never hesitated. History records numerous sieges where ballistae played decisive roles. At Masada in 73 CE, Jewish defenders reportedly could not approach the walls without risking instant death from perfectly aimed Roman artillery. In Jerusalem, during the Great Siege of 70 CE, Titus commanded a terrifying number of siege engines, Ballista included, raining stones and bolts upon the city day and night. The physical destruction was immense, but the psychological toll was even greater. How long could anyone endure when the sky itself seemed to be throwing stones at them? But the ballista was not confined only to sieges. Rome, ever pragmatic, adapted smaller versions for open-field warfare. These mobile machines, mounted on wagons or carried in pieces with each legion, provided lethal ranged fire long before two armies ever clashed. Enemy formations attempting to advance on Roman lines found themselves shredded by bolts that pierced shields and armor as if they were parchment. Cavalry units approaching too boldly were cut down before they reached striking distance. Even the most fearless warriors hesitated when the Romans unleashed their artillery. Ballistae turned the battlefield into a place where death could arrive without warning, from a direction no one could anticipate. Operating a ballista demanded skill and discipline. Each machine required a trained crew, and every soldier had a specific task. One man handled the winch, another loaded the projectile, another ensured the aiming frame was aligned, while a superior oversaw every detail to guarantee the machine fired at maximum power without destroying itself. A single miscalculation, too much tension, moisture in the sinew, an imbalanced frame, could cause catastrophic failure. Thus, Rome established specialized artillery units within their legions, composed of engineers, craftsmen, and operators who understood the delicate balance of tension and release. They were not merely soldiers, they were technicians of war. Maintenance was as important as operation. The sinew bundles had to remain dry at all costs, for dampness would sap their strength and reduce their elasticity. Roman armies marched with spare tendons, replacement parts, and tools for adjusting tension. Even in the midst of long campaigns, the ballistae were kept in prime condition, ready to fire at a moment's notice. No other ancient army managed their siege engines with such professionalism. Where others relied on improvised machines built on the spot, Rome marched into battle with a fully prepared, fully standardized arsenal. It was this readiness that made their artillery terrifyingly effective. The message was clear. No fortification was safe. No battlefield was beyond Rome's reach. Even after witnessing its devastating power, one might still underestimate how deeply the ballista shaped the Roman philosophy of warfare. For Rome, victory was never a matter of brute strength alone. It was the product of discipline, engineering, and an unwavering belief that every problem could be solved with the right mechanism. The ballista embodied this belief perfectly. It was not designed to inspire awe, though it certainly did, but to achieve results with cold efficiency. Every bolt fired, every stone hurled, served a precise purpose within the broader machinery of conquest. It reduced enemy fortifications from proud symbols of resistance to fragile shells trembling under mechanical punishment. It silenced defenders not through chaos, but through the measured rhythm of a war machine operating exactly as intended. What made the ballista even more remarkable was its endurance across the centuries. When the Western Roman Empire fell, the weapon did not vanish with it. Instead, the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, continued to preserve and refine the design, folding it into their own military doctrines. They improved its stability, enhanced its materials, and adapted it to new forms of warfare. Medieval engineers, inheriting a fragmented memory of Rome's brilliance, experimented with modified versions of the ballista, sometimes blending its principles with newer inventions. Though great trebuchets and later gunpowder artillery would eventually overshadow it, the ballista remained part of military arsenals far longer than many realize. Its longevity came from the timeless simplicity of its underlying idea: store energy, then release it in a focused, destructive burst. This principle, applied by Greeks, perfected by Romans, and preserved by Byzantines, would one day evolve into crossbows, torsion engines, and finally cannons powered by the explosive force of gunpowder. In a sense, every artillery piece in the centuries that followed carried a fragment of the ballista's legacy. Its spirit endured in every battlefield where ranged mechanical force shaped fate from afar. Looking back upon the ballista today, we see more than a machine of war. We see a monument to human ingenuity capable of both creation and destruction. We see how the Romans, with their relentless pursuit of improvement, turned a borrowed Greek concept into a weapon of unparalleled accuracy and power. We see how siege warfare itself was transformed, how the balance between attacker and defender shifted irrevocably once Rome mastered the art of precision artillery. And perhaps most strikingly, we see how technology can redefine the limits of possibility, forcing entire civilizations to rethink how they build, defend, and wage war. The ballista was not merely a tool of conquest, it was a statement. It declared that Rome understood the mechanics of fear just as well as the mechanics of wood, iron, and sinew. It announced that no wall, no tower, no warrior perched upon a battlement could ever truly be beyond reach. And as its thunderous shots echoed across valleys and deserts, its presence proclaimed a truth that countless foes came to know firsthand. When Rome marched, it marched with the precision of a machine, and resistance, no matter how valiant, faced the relentless will of an empire that believed no obstacle was insurmountable. Yet beyond its mechanical brilliance and battlefield dominance, the ballista reveals something deeper about the Roman worldview. To the Romans, war was not an art of chaos, but a discipline of order. Every Roman legionnaire marched with the understanding that he was part of a larger mechanism, a living extension of the empire's will. And the ballista, with its gears, sinews, levers, and calculated tension, became the perfect symbol of that philosophy. It was the embodiment of Rome's belief that precision could triumph over passion, that structure could defeat spontaneity, and that any obstacle, whether a fortified wall or an entire nation, could be broken down through methodical effort. This mindset allowed the Romans to adapt the ballista to nearly every imaginable scenario. In difficult mountain passes, they assembled lighter versions to target enemy ambushes hidden along the cliffs. In naval warfare, they mounted ballistae on ships to fire bolts capable of tearing through enemy sails and rigging, turning the sea into yet another domain where Roman engineering asserted dominance. Even when facing opponents who relied on swift cavalry charges, the Romans deployed mobile artillery teams who could fire, disassemble, reposition, and fire again before the dust of the charge settled. The ballista became not just a siege engine, but a versatile instrument that reshaped how Rome approached every theater of war. To operate such a machine required unwavering discipline. Artillery crews trained tirelessly, learning the subtle language of tension and release. memorizing the exact amount of force needed to achieve maximum range without damaging the sinew bundles. These crews often carried pride equal to that of elite infantry units, for they knew that their contributions could soften enemy lines long before swords clashed. In many battles, commanders relied on their artillery units to dictate the pace of conflict, opening gaps, disrupting formations, or simply breaking the morale of those who dared stand before Rome. The sound of a ballista being fired, a deep, resonant thud followed by the whistling flight of a massive projectile, became a psychological weapon unto itself. But the Romans understood, perhaps better than any civilization before them, that no technology remains supreme forever. They witnessed how innovations could rise, spread, and eventually be replaced. The ballista, though unmatched in its prime, gradually yielded to newer siege machines, such as the trebuchet with its counterweight precision. And yet, even as these successors emerged, the ballista's influence lingered. Its principles of stored energy, mechanical efficiency, and standardized production directly shaped medieval warfare and laid the foundation for future engineering breakthroughs. Still, the ballista's most enduring legacy lies not in the machines it inspired, but in the mentality it represented. For Rome, the ballista was proof that challenges existed only to be understood and overcome. Walls grew taller, they built stronger artillery, enemies adapted their tactics. Rome refined theirs in return. Every Roman engineer, every legion's artillery crew, contributed to a continuous cycle of innovation that propelled the empire forward. In this way, the ballista stands as a testament not only to destructive capability, but to a civilization that believed mastery of nature, of physics, of materials, of human organization, was the key to ruling the world. And so, when we imagine the ballista today, firing across dusty plains or pounding against stone battlements, we witness more than a weapon. We witness a civilization expressing itself. The Romans carved their identity into history not just through conquest, but through machines like the ballista, machines that echoed their values, reflected their ambitions, and broadcasted their certainty that Rome, disciplined and relentless, was destined to dominate the ancient world. Yet for all its majesty and fearsome power, the ballista was ultimately a human creation, crafted, maintained, and unleashed by individuals whose lives were bound to the rhythm of war. To understand the machine fully, one must imagine the men who stood behind it. Before each shot, they gathered around the wooden frame, hands calloused from years of labor, eyes fixed on the distant target. They listened to the creak of the sinew bundles tightening under the pull of the winch, felt the tremor of stored energy humming through the structure, and sensed the weight of responsibility resting on their shoulders. For when the order came to fire, the result was irreversible. The bolt or stone that left the arms of the ballista carried with it not only physical destruction, but the intention of an empire. These artillery crews often formed a world of their own within the legion. They shared a bond forged not through close-quarters combat, but through the delicate interplay of knowledge, precision, and trust. A single misstep, incorrect tension, a dampened sinew, a faulty trigger, could cause the entire machine to fail catastrophically. And so they lived with a constant awareness of danger, not from enemy blades, but from the very weapon they operated. Still, their pride was immense. While infantry and cavalry won glory in the chaos of battle, the artillerymen shaped the battlefield long before combat began. Their work demanded patience, intellect, and nerves of steel. In many ways, they were the quiet architects of victory. Across the empire, Soldiers and civilians alike grew to recognize the distinctive whistle of a ballista shot cutting through the air. On the battlefield, that sound signaled death descending from afar. In besieged cities, it marked the slow erosion of hope. Families huddled behind walls, praying that each thunderous impact would not be their final moment. And on the Roman side, the same sound symbolized control, the assurance that the empire's might extended beyond the reach of any sword or shield. The Romans wielded fear with the same precision they wielded engineering. Over time, stories and legends began to surround these machines. Some claimed that ballista bolts could pierce multiple men in a single shot. Others spoke of stones that shattered towers as though they were made of sand. While exaggeration inevitably seeped into such tales, their persistence reveals the profound psychological impact the ballista left on ancient imagination. To many, it seemed less a tool and more an omen, one that heralded the arrival of a force too powerful to resist. But history teaches that no empire, no invention, no matter how advanced, remains unchallenged forever. As the centuries passed, new forms of warfare emerged. Engineers across Europe and the Near East built heavier, more destructive siege engines that surpassed the ballista in raw force. Eventually, gunpowder transformed the battlefield entirely, giving rise to cannons capable of leveling fortresses in a fraction of the time. And yet, even as the ballista faded from practical use, its shadow continued to stretch across history. Every innovation that followed, every catapult, trebuchet, and cannon, owed something to the principle the ballista had perfected: the harnessing of stored energy to project force with controlled devastation. Today, the ballista survives not on battlefields but in museums, reenactments, and the collective memory of a civilization fascinated by its own past. Historians study its construction to understand ancient engineering. Enthusiasts rebuild it to marvel at its power, and storytellers evoke its presence to remind us of the awe that machines can inspire. For even in silence, a ballista speaks volumes about the people who created it, about their ambition, their ingenuity, and the lengths to which they would go to impose order on a chaotic world. In the end, the ballista stands as a paradox, a masterpiece of precision born from humanity's deepest instincts for survival and dominance. It is both a triumph of intellect and a reminder of the devastation intellect can unleash. And as we look back on the ruins it once helped create, we see not only the destruction of ancient walls, but the rise of a civilization that believed no boundary, physical or conceptual, could withstand the disciplined force of Rome. Even as the ballista receded from the battlefield, its influence lingered like an echo through the evolution of warfare. Scholars in later centuries would look back on Roman designs with admiration, realizing that these ancient machines were far more sophisticated than they first appeared. The precision of their measurements, the uniformity of their construction, and the reliability of their performance suggested a level of standardization rarely seen in antiquity. These were not crude tools hammered together in desperation. They were products of an empire that valued calculation, craftsmanship, and repeatability. In fact, modern reconstructions of ballistae have confirmed what ancient writers hinted at. When properly built and calibrated, these machines were astonishingly accurate, capable of hitting targets with consistency that would challenge even skilled archers. Their range and stability rivaled early gunpowder weapons, demonstrating just how advanced Roman engineering truly was. But perhaps the ballista's most profound legacy lies in its symbolic power. It represented the moment when warfare shifted from personal combat to mechanical domination. Before machines like the Ballista, battles were decided largely by the strength, courage, and agility of individuals. With the arrival of torsion artillery, the battlefield became a place where machines extended human reach beyond natural limits, where victory depended not just on heroes, but on craftsmen, mathematicians, and engineers. Rome understood this transformation intuitively. By embracing technology, they multiplied their strength, allowing legions to subdue regions far larger and more populous than themselves. This shift would shape military history for millennia. The greater the machine, the greater the influence of the society that built it. And yet, for all its technical brilliance, the Ballista also reveals the darker side of human ingenuity. Its bolts and stones were not fired at empty targets. They crashed into homes, fortresses, and the bodies of men defending their cities. The psychological toll of these machines was immense. Ancient accounts describe defenders who grew terrified to lift their heads above the parapets, who listened to the growing hum of a tensioned sinew with the dread of prisoners awaiting judgment. For them, the Ballista was not an engineering marvel, but an omen of destruction. Its silence was terrifying, its roar even more so. In a world where most death came from the swing of a sword or the thrust of a spear, the impersonal nature of mechanical warfare introduced a new kind of fear, a fear of being struck down by something unseen, distant, and unstoppable. Yet, it is precisely this duality, marvel and menace, that makes the Ballista so captivating today. It stands at the crossroads of creativity and destruction, a reminder that human brilliance can build wonders even in the pursuit of war. As modern audiences look back on Rome's engineering achievements, they often admire the aqueducts, roads, and monuments. But the Ballista belongs to a different kind of legacy, one that demonstrates how technology can both elevate and endanger, empowering civilizations while reminding them of the consequences of their ambitions. The Romans themselves seemed aware of this tension, documenting their machines with pride, but also with an understanding that such power demanded respect and control. Looking at a reconstructed Ballista today, standing silent against the backdrop of a museum hall or an open field, it is impossible not to imagine the world it once shaped. The creak of its wooden limbs, the tightening of its sinew bundles, the thud of its release, these sounds once dictated the fate of cities. They once commanded armies to advance or retreat, once echoed through valleys where entire peoples fought for survival. And though centuries have passed since the last Roman artillery crew packed away their tools, the presence of the Ballista lingers, whispering stories of an empire that learned to channel the laws of nature into the service of conquest. The Ballista, in the end, is more than an artifact. It is a testament to humanity's unending pursuit of mastery over the physical world. It invites us to consider not only what the Romans built, but why they built it, and what lessons lie in the machines we continue to build today. For the arc of a ballista's bolt, rising, soaring, and crashing down with precision, mirrors the arc of human ambition itself, powerful, far-reaching, and forever shaped by the forces we choose to unleash.